The topic of our presentation would be, does emotional labor and service work promotes gender occupational segregation? I will be first introducing a few concepts. The first one would be gender identity. Gender identity is a socially constructed difference between sexes. It is internalized in the subconscious as disposition to act or think in a particular way, such as when babies are born, baby girls are supposed to wear pink and baby boys are supposed to wear blue. Because gender identity is socially constructed, it is often refined and put to the test. In most case study, the male worker working in emotional labor market find their gender masculinity is often challenged when working in the traditional female areas of works. Service economy is an economy where most of the employment is generated in the service sector, or the increasing importance of a growing customer service ethics. In Britain, the service sectors now provide most employment. Offering 1989 constructed four subsector of service employment, in which each subsector is characterized by four main service activity. The first one is producer service, which is an intermediate input for further function activities that are not sold to other firms. An example would be business and financial firm. They primarily generate highly skilled white-collar workers that require high-level skill and educational qualification. Men outnumber women in top-end occupation, while women significantly outnumber men in low-level clerical application. The second one would be social service, which provide final consumption for household and are distinctive for their non-market character. They are usually provided by the states. An example would be health service and educational service. Social service is one of the largest service subsector. Skill and educational requirements are mixed, both very high and low level. Women dominates many of the lower level caring, nursing, and clerical application, but the subsector is also a key source for professional and associate professional employment for women, although men again dominates very high level occupation. The third subsector would be distributive service. It is the movement of people, information, and commodities, can be either intermediates or final consumption. An example would be transport, communication, and retail. Employment is manual, low skill, and male dominated, although the fastest growing service activity in the subsector is retail, are female dominated. Educational skill is mixed. And the last subsector would be personal service. They provide final consumption for household and are characterized by direct contact between consumer and service provider. An example is hotel, bars, and restaurant. Educational is generally low, and in the personal service, it is a female dominated and customer oriented. The service economy is characterized by the growth of a very different kind of works, the simultaneous growth of very highly skilled occupation in producer and social service, and very low skilled occupation and in distributive and personal service is leading to the hollowing out or polarization of the employment structure.
Following Oxford 1983 and 1993, emotional labor refers to the management of human feeling during social interaction within the labor process, as shaped by the dictates of capital accumulation. And until recently, this phenomenon has been heavily neglected by the British Academy, such as James 1989, Fuller and Smith and Co. However, analysis of emotional labor are crucial to fully appreciate the emergence of the new workplace, when restricting attention to where jobs where emotional labor was the main human capacity is sold to an employer. Basically, the main problems, the main issues with emotional labor are the genuine concern for customer needs, perception of service quality, and the control over feelings. Because when you face angry clients or people who are generally unpleasant, emotional labor can be particularly challenging. A large part of that challenge comes from the need to hide your real emotions and continue to smile and nod your head, even when receiving negative or critical feedback. And there are two different techniques in achieving this. The first one is the surface acting, trying to fake or pretend an emotion using unnatural and artificial body language and verbal communication. This smiling and usage of different voice tone is to deal with certain customer situations. It might not probably be the script by which the organization would want their employees to act at all the time, but that's what they do at certain situations. And the other one is the deep acting, is the controlling of internal emotion. It's like a scripted pattern of behavior when employees are working in the labor when employees are working in the labor process. Everything is being scripted for them, and they make customers believe that they are actually happy all the time with interactions with people and convincing themselves and other employees that they are not experiencing a negative reaction. When you engage in emotional labor, you control your feelings to fulfill goals and expectations of your organization. But from a practical standpoint, it means that you're either expressing only positive feelings, hiding or managing your negative feelings. To deal with negative emotions, people tend to do one of the following. Basically, this results in emotional conflicts. It leads to emotional exhaustion and burnout for workers, because there will be a difference between the employee's personal emotions and the emotions that are being displayed at particular times within the labor market. And this creates a disconnection from their close personal relationships. This also tends to increase the levels of stress as well. Because when they continually show these emotions, they are appropriate for the job, despite how they really feel, it can lead to an emotional conflict between their real emotions and those that are being shown to people. Another factor may be a person's ability to recognize different social situations and how to behave appropriately, which may be a problem for them. Because people with more negative personalities and lower social awareness tend to have the hardest time dealing with emotional conflicts, and they probably experience emotional exhaustion more easily. Service workers typically need to perform in a certain way if they are going to provide high quality service. This is usually defined by management, then strictly regulated and monitored. For example, customer service rules might be the customer is always right or always greet customers with a smile. Basically, I worked in a charity organization, and we're under Imperial Marketing, and there were a high proportion of female workers there. They're really working the ropes well, and the level of promotion, the promotion criteria, they fitted well into the promotion criteria. So there are more females in management, but overall senior managers are male. So because it was a door-to-door marketing company, it was actually easier for the females to display a more positive character to people that they're selling to than males. Basically, the females actually have a positive reaction and a positive show or display of character when compared to males in the company. And I actually experienced this firsthand because of the people that I teamed up with, and I found out that the females had an advantage over the males.
What is gendered occupational segregation? Well, this term defines as the unequal distribution of men and women in the occupational structure. And there are two types of gendered occupational segregation, which is the vertical segregation, which is vertical in the hierarchy, and horizontal segregation, which is within the hierarchy itself. Before the World War, jobs are mainly dominated by men. And post-World War, with the rise of female rights and introduction of taxation to the female, this leads to female leaving their household work to obtain job, and basically thus creating the issues of gendered occupational segregation. Well, our main argument today is segregation by sex followed by the need of emotional labor in service scape leads to gender discrimination in the workplace. I'll be using Darren Nixon's research, where he did an empirical study exploring the reconstruction of UK economy from industrial to service economy. What he found out is that most working class men drop off their labor market, which was caused by the industrialization in the 1980s, and it has to do something with gender occupational segregation, as service work is female dominated at that time. Well, what he found out was the two main reasons why men are reluctant to take service work at that time. It's because of two main reasons. Because male take pride in their work, which is central to their identity. what it means there is men during the industrialization era, they take pride in their work. As for example, construction. In the interview, they say construction isn't a background identity to their family. His grandfather was used to be work in the construction, so does his father, and so does him, thus creating the identity. That's the main reason. Number two is emotional labor is opposing to working class habituous. What it means there is emotional labor is seen as something strange, according to one of the interview, an older man, saying that he wouldn't work in a retail because he said the needs of emotional labor is too stressful for him. And also a younger man said that putting the customer needs and the managerial needs before their own needs is somewhat impossible task to do. Well, I can relate to this. I remember one time when I finished my A-level, I went to work in a part-time job in a restaurant, in a local restaurant. So basically, at first, I was asked to do a waiting table. That requires me to do some emotional labor, although not to a high degree. It was just smiling to the customers when serving them. Then I found this rather disturbing, as I was reminded every day by my manager. In the end, I talked to him, and then I said I'd rather wash dishes rather than serving customers. So the interview, one of the men said that if he was asked to work in retail environment, which is service work, he wouldn't want to work in the retail area, in the retail store. He'd rather work behind the scenes as a delivery man.
That ran a study on 3,000 men in America. The study found that working class men watch more television and do less childcare than working class women. This shows that even though women have a job, they are also expected to do the household jobs too, which are more traditionally the female roles. Working class men are also less likely to do overtime than more affluent men, and they value being hardworking as one of the most important qualities to have. Gender differences at work. Men perform better with competition. In a study carried out in 2003, participants were set tasks to solve on computers. The results showed that both men and women performed equally as well as each other, whilst performing individually. However, men performed better when there was an element of competitiveness introduced. This viewpoint is supported further because men always want to earn more than the guy in the next cubicle to them whilst working in an office. Masculinity. In the USA, the percentage of men in full-time work has shrunk to 66% as opposed to 80% 45 years prior. This may lead to them taking on more female roles, which often leads to men fearing that they cannot live up to their individual perceptions of masculinity. This may often lead to cultural betrayal, because if somebody decides to go to university rather than following a career in workmanship like the rest of their family, then the person going off to university may be seen as having a feminine role that is not traditional to what the rest of their family does. And male roles tend to have preferences to status-based careers. An example of this is that I used to work in a retail store and the supervisors and managers were all male. So this shows that there is a relation between males and status-based roles. Whereas female roles tend to have preferences to careers with positive employee relations. These individuals are often sensitive to their interpersonal relations and are concerned about others. Individuals in these particular roles are concerned with their contribution to society rather than their profit/turnover, which are generally associated with male roles and masculinity. This could relate to alternative roles because they have concerns for their environment and could be categorised as feminine roles. So I also read a study by Hancock in 2012 showed that males are beginning to have non-traditional occupancies. This may be because of the unstable job market in the US, as shown in the masculinity slide, which could be due to a redundancy. A study conducted by Alison J. Pugh found that men who get made redundant often see it as an opportunity to work on their fatherhood, which relates further to males taking on non-traditional roles because it is usually the woman in the family who looks after the children. An example of a new man is David Beckham, because he possesses feminine characteristics such as being compassionate and being fashionable, whilst also possessing masculine characteristics like being loyal and being the breadwinner of his family, which is a prime example of masculinity in the modern world.
Okay, what we can see here is a study conducted on selected occupations in the year 2005, which was carried out by Darren Nixon, and it can also be found in his study on working class masculinity, emotional labour and service work. What you can see here is that certain roles tend to be highly dominated by women, whilst there are other roles which are highly dominated by men. And this is usually through a stereotypical view whereby even in today's day and age there is still a need for reformation within society and their perception of work to enable equality gendered work. An example from this table is that a retail manager tends to be predominantly male, whereas a care assistant or a nurse tends to be predominantly woman. My personal experience working in a Tesco warehouse, where I had the opportunity to work with a number of men and women, was that this idea that women didn't work as hard as men, or that men were harder workers, I personally find it to be untrue. Reason why I say this is because I first-hand witnessed women and men working equally, despite the manager being a male. In another research conducted by Robert Stenge from the University of Washington State, it showed numerous researches where 5 studies were conducted, whereby women in work fields where there were also an equal amount of men, and when the women were asked the question about their performance at work and whether they worked harder, majority of them unanimously agreed that they felt that the women worked harder and they performed better. In conclusion, Darren Nixon argued that there is a displacement in working man towards service work, because service work is seen as something that is dominated by women, and this causes the working class man to feel reluctant, as they feel that they are less empowered in their decision making. Also, the requirement of emotional labour does not match the working class habitus. In contrast to this argument, in recent years, more men are going into non-traditional roles, and these very men, in fact, do not mind doing non-traditional occupational roles, with the example that was given earlier with David Beckham holding certain characteristics that would be described as feminine. This is because of liberation and modernity, and therefore does emotional labour in service work justify gender occupational segregation, as argued by Darren Nixon.